Welcome to the Mindfully Masculine podcast with Charles and Dan, where we take a conscious, holistic, and direct approach to relationships, mental health, and self-improvement. For additional content, visit our website at mindfullymasculine.com. And to interact with us, our guests, and your fellow listeners, join the Mindfully Masculine group on Facebook.
Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Dan. How are we doing?
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay is good enough on many days.
Yeah, it can't be an 8 on every day, right?
No, you can't,
because then there wouldn't be any other numbers necessary. So yeah,
exactly. If you were an 8 every day, an 8 would feel like a 5, right?
I like that analogy. When 8s become 5s. How about you?
Speaking of which, I'm doing well.
Okay.
That did remind me about Enneagrams, and I think we may have mentioned it briefly on the podcast before, but a few weeks ago I took an Enneagram test online, which generally, I mean, people who consider themselves, Enneagram coaches will tell you, don't just take some test online. You need to talk to a professional, whatever.
Hold on a second. I didn't know. I mean, that they're actual coaches for Enneagrams. Wow.
And apparently the barrier to entry to become an Enneagram coach is similar to the barrier of entry to becoming a technology consultant. Basically, you need a website and a business card, and then there you go.
Oh, okay. All right.
So maybe we should become Enneagram coaches, Dan.
Add that to my list of occupations.
Yeah. But so I took the test a few weeks ago, and I am an 8 with a 7 wing. Mm-hmm. And I believe the title is the Challenger, I want to say.
Mm-hmm. Sounds about right.
Yeah, no, there's a more specific title than that. Let me see if I can grab it real quick.
Yeah.
8W. Like, I think the Challenger is just 8s in general. And then, 8 with 7 is the nonconformist. Does that sound even more specifically appropriate?
Yep.
Yeah. So I highly recommend finding a site where you can take the test for free. The one I took was about 70 questions, and took me probably 40 minutes or so to do.
Okay.
And I've been blown away how accurate and insightful it is, even more than, I've always been a big fan of Myers-Briggs and the Big Five and all that stuff. But this one seems to have me nailed more than any other personality test or assessment that I've ever taken. It blows me away. I love it.
I think that's why it's so popular, because every person that I've talked to before I took it and even afterwards say the exact same thing that you did. And I say about me too. I'm a 9-1 wing. Yeah. I am the negotiator. And it is so accurate, especially for me when I read that. What's nice is they give you very, I think, balanced information, both good and bad, about, your type. But what I also liked was, at least the one that I read, was when you're at your best, these are the traits and characteristics you display. When you're at your worst, these are the traits and characteristics that you display. And that I found very helpful to kind of stay out of my worst.
Yes. No,
when I gravitate towards doing those things, I'm like, yeah, let's not be a bad 9.
Right. Yeah. No. And boy, when 8s go bad, they go real bad.
Do tell. Don't tease me.
Let me see if I
what does that mean?
Some
real bad. Oh boy.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find some famous 8s.
Oh.
Okay. This list is too positive. Let me see. Okay, here's some of the good ones. Martin Luther King Jr.
Okay.
Winston Churchill. Bernie Sanders. AOC is on the list. I'm pretty sure I saw some dictators, though. Let me see if I can find that list.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That's when they go bad. They go really bad. That's so funny.
It's kind of hard. They kind of go they make these approximations based on, what they think about it. There's no way to know for sure what these people were, because obviously these historical figures didn't actually take the test. But
right. Yeah.
Boy, I'm trying to find it and I'm not coming up. But yeah, I remember when my friend and I took it and we were going over the list. There were some people on it. I was like, oof, wow, that is not some great company that I'm in. Let's see.
So while you're looking at this, I'll just kind of explain for people who aren't familiar with the Enneagram. So this is coming from personalitydata.org. The Enneagram of personality is a model that expresses the human psyche of individuals via the typology of 9 interconnected personality types. These 9 personality types, known as enneatypes, represent a point on the Enneagram geometric figure. So basically, it's like a circle, and it goes 9s at the top, and then it just goes around one, all the way 1 clockwise, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, it shows, and then there's these models, and you don't have all one type, like you dominate in one certain area. And basically it's a lot of questions about I guess the questions are really insightful, but they're asked in different ways. So the same answer might be slightly different depending on the way they phrase the question. I think that's what really helps with the nuance of determining where you fall on the chart, right?
Right. And the part of the reason they do that is to get to the core of, a big part of who you are as a person is who you think you are as a person. It's, it's not just concerned about the objective, what is Charles like? It's also concerned with what does Charles think Charles is like, and what does that actually make him, and
that's good.
That's where it does get interesting. There was I listened to a podcast episode, Glennon Doyle's podcast that she does. And they, like, one of her most requested topics was to talk to an Enneagram expert. So I will share a link to that episode of her podcast on our show notes, so that if you want to hear like an Enneagram expert get interviewed and talk about it. And one exercise they did toward the end of the episode was like, okay, if you hosted a dinner party and you invited one person from each Enneagram, like, what would that person bring, and what would that person's experience like bring to your party? And it was really interesting to hear her talk about it.
Very interesting. Yeah, I like that. And a great quote from the site that I just rambled about: the Enneagram doesn't put you in a box; it shows you the box you're already in and how to get out of it.
Yeah, and another thing that I've heard talked about is all it tries to explain is what motivates you, not what you are, not what you should be, but just the kind of things that push you to make the decisions that you make. Which, isn't that the most important thing we can understand about ourselves? Is why am I the way that I am, and why do I make the choices that I make?
Yeah, because then once you start looking at that, you can start making different choices if you like.
One of the things that has struck me as very interesting is when I talk about this with the ladies in my life, my friends, I am an 8, utterly surrounded by 4s. Like
wow.
Yes, almost. So the women that I'm friendly with at work, my ex-girlfriend, it's
that's just interesting.
A sea of 4s.
So I don't know about the women that I hang out with, but most of the guys, I think, and some of the women too, are all 8s.
Interesting.
Yes, I collect 8s like there's nobody's business. I swear to God. Wild. My ex was an 8. You're an 8. You guys are exact. By the way, my ex and you are both exact same 8 wing 7. Yeah,
8 wing 7. Yeah.
It's just, I don't know.
It's funny. One of your ex and I have a mutual friend, my ex-girlfriend, Ariel. She saw Christy reference something about her Enneagram on her Instagram story. And that's what reminded us to both go ahead and get ours done.
Out. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It was the fact that Christy shared something about her Enneagram on her Instagram story that led us to say, we were sitting at a Starbucks at Disney Springs, and we were like, let's go ahead and take this and see what comes up. And we were walking from Disney Springs all the way back to the old Key West resort, which is probably a 40-minute walk, or maybe not quite that long, maybe about half an hour. And we did a little bit of, we started it at the Starbucks, and then by the time we got back, we were pretty much done. And it's like, okay, now here's what we both are. And then the rest of the day that we were hanging out, we just pretty much looked at memes and articles and things like that. And just our minds just kept getting more and more blown.
Yeah.
One of the really cool things you can search is if you're in a relationship with someone, or, you're friends with someone, you can look and see what those two Enneagram types are like together when they interact in a relationship.
Oh, wow.
And also completely spot on, like ridiculous.
That's fantastic. Yeah. What's interesting was I had taken it like a couple of years ago, and I kind of forgot what I was because I didn't really kind of keep up with it. And then I'm like, all right. And I had taken that with my ex at the time, and she was reading the questions to me. And we were talking about, like, we're kind of going through, and I was like, I think I'm this. And she's like, no, you're kind of like that. And so I felt maybe, that 8 was kind of taking over my Enneagram, kind of like and I ended up being a 9. And
that does seem like something we would do.
Right. Correct. Right. Like, yeah. But the funny thing is, I took it again after you said you went, took it. I went and took it again, but completely by myself. The exact same thing. 9 wing 1. And I was like, okay, there's something here.
Yeah. It's funny. My Myers-Briggs, last time I took it, has actually changed. I went from ENTJ to ENTP, which let me see what those differences. I think J is judging, maybe. Okay. And the P might be perceiving. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Wrong.
That
sounds
right.
It up. Let's see. ENFP. Prospecting.
Okay.
Extroverted, intuitive. No, wait, that's not right. That might not be right. Hold on.
Perceiving.
What?
Yeah.
Perceiving. Okay. Yeah. What are the things that has recently become a great source of humor for me is when you Google something and then you see the commonly asked questions about it.
Yeah. Some of them are funny.
Yes. Is ENFP a rare personality? What are they not good at? Are ENFPs good in bed? How do ENFPs deal with breakups? Wow. Are ENFPs clingy? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking up the wrong thing. ENTP, not FP.
Oh, boy.
Yes. Okay, that's it. ENTP.
Okay.
The debater. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, I find these things extremely interesting because it gives you some insight and ability to look at yourself in a way that you're not used to looking at yourself. So yeah, I love a good personality test. The Big Five's really good.
What is that?
That one is,
I've never heard of that one.
Yeah. Let's see. It doesn't really give you a label. It just sort of gives you a sliding chart on where you are in the following areas. The Big Five personality traits are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Oh, I have heard of that.
And then you're either, then it basically tells you how high or how low you are in each of those. I'm very high in openness. I'm very high in extroversion. And then I'm pretty low in the other ones. Conscientiousness, very low at agreeableness. I'm about as disagreeable as it gets. And pretty low in neuroticism, though. In neuroticism, for purposes of this, it basically means how sort of susceptible you are to negative emotions, how much negative emotions affect you and your experience. One of the issues with, if you remember the James Damore Google memo that he put out a while ago, a couple of years ago, it was a big controversy where he basically said that one of the reasons that there aren't more women in the technology industry is because on average, women are more interested in people and men are more interested in things. And therefore women will again, on average, not talking about any individual, on average, women will be less attracted to engineering jobs and more attracted to jobs where they deal with people.
Interesting.
And so he got fired. Obviously, he can't say it. And one of the things that people latched onto was he mentioned the different aspects of the big five personality traits, and he used the fact that women typically score higher in neuroticism. And it immediately turned into, how dare you say that women are neurotic, blah, 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 where it's like, no, this is an actual scientific term that means something specific. And on average, yes, women do score higher in it. But, it's I can understand why it's a triggering word, and it has some baggage attached to it that make people feel bad. So yeah, I get it. It's just, in a scientific pursuit, it's best to, like what we're about to talk about with meditation, it's best to observe that, look at it without judgment, and then kind of move on, to say, okay, yes, this word can be problematic because some people can have a problem with it, and then share with people what it actually means in this scientific, psychological context, and then move along.
I agree. That's the thing is, if there are words that even sound like other words that are potentially trouble, this day and age, you need to cover your bases, right? And kind of just make it easy for people to understand you. And that means maybe explaining things in a little bit different way. And that might mean defining the terms before you get into them. Right.
Yeah. Correct. And it comes down to something I struggle with often, which is, okay, do I want to be right, or do I want people to understand the feelings behind what I'm trying to say? It's like, do I want to win the argument, or do I want to engage with somebody in a way where I can actually hear what they're telling me and they can actually hear what I'm trying to tell them?
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. Because sometimes it's like, well, do you really want, do you need to be right when it comes to, this topic and this person? Right.
Right. So yeah. And it's, that thing we've talked about before, when you're having a fight with a friend or a partner, and it's, trying to keep that focus on me and you versus the problem instead of me against you. And man, it feels impossible in the moment to shake yourself loose. But there is something you can do that can develop that skill. That's what we're going to talk about on today's episode.
Oh, right. Great. What's that going to be?
So we're going to talk a little bit about meditation and the experiences you and I have had with meditation, and what we do and the benefits that we get out of it. This was another topic that I did a Google search last night and again this morning to see if I could find some good articles, and I did, and I'll share those in the notes. But as usual, Google presented me the list of questions that people are asking in this area. Here's some good ones. Does meditation work for men? How do you meditate for men? How do men meditate for beginners? And my personal favorite, does meditation make you handsome?
Isn't it obvious?
Yes, clearly it does. One could say not directly, but indirectly. Yeah, we'll talk about some of the benefits of it, and I think you can make a pretty clear case that a meditator who lets that meditation practice sort of trickle into the other parts of his life could look better than somebody who doesn't. All other things being equal, which they never are, but
Yeah.
Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about my experience with meditation. So, about 4 or 5 years ago, I started really getting into Sam Harris's work and the books he writes and his podcast. And I was introduced to him from, I can't remember if it was, I think it was because he was a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast, which, I don't listen to Rogan's podcast as frequently as I used to. I'd always been kind of I was never he doesn't put a show out every day, but I was never a daily listener. It was always more for me about who's his guest. Like he himself, and you and I saw him he came to Orlando and did a comedy show and stuff like that. And he was on News Radio and Fear Factor. Yeah. I've never been just a fan of Joe Rogan. His comedy's pretty good. He's funny. I appreciated the free ticket that you gave me. So thanks again for that. But the people he surrounds himself with are really what makes him who he is. You know, the fact that he's got, you know, astrophysicists and dumb comedy buddies on his show. And I would watch
a wide variety,
very wide variety. And he's a curious guy, which I appreciate too. He's willing to sit down in a room with somebody who's clearly smarter than him. And I would argue some guys who are clearly funnier than him, and just experience a conversation with somebody without feeling, you know, self-conscious or embarrassed that he's with somebody who's smarter or funnier. He might not think that the people that I think are funnier than him, but they totally are. So anyway, so I can't remember if he was interviewing Sam Harris or Sam Harris was on Bill Maher's show, because they do a fair amount of work together too. They're kind of, you know, they're both atheists, they're both liberal, they kind of share some political and philosophical ideas, so they spend a fair amount of time talking to each other and seem friendly. But yeah, so I started getting into his books that he's written on religion, philosophy, and finally he wrote a book called Waking Up that dealt very heavily with the mind and consciousness and meditation. And so when for a long time he was working on creating a meditation app that he would reference on his podcast and on other shows that he went on. And basically they had a beta program where you could subscribe to it at a very discounted rate and put up with some of the technical hiccups that you do during a beta. But if you did that, then you basically locked in that rate forever. And so I think I'm paying $7 a month. And for that $7 a month, I get full access to his podcast, where when he releases a podcast, he'll like release a short version of it for the public for free, and then the full version for his subscribers. And then he also has his meditation app, which has daily mindfulness and meditations. I think he does a 10-minute and a 20-minute every day. And then he also has a lot of conversations with other people in the meditation field or space where he talks to people about different kinds of meditation and things like that. So I've been subscribing to that app for years now. And I use his meditation app on a pretty close to daily basis. I've been neglecting it a little bit lately, but I'm working on getting back into my normal daily things that I have to do to stay sane and healthy. And yeah, 10 minutes of meditation is definitely one of those things. So he practices, for the most part, mindfulness meditation, but he does have a few audio clips on his app for other kinds of meditation. He does a walking meditation, and he also does metta meditation, MEHTA, which is also called loving kindness meditation, where basically you spend the whole session wishing well on some person in your life that you know and that you care about, and that he always says someone you have an uncomplicated relationship with, that you just want the best for them.
Oh, nice.
And so you just spend the whole time, you know, basically sending them good vibes, if you believe that's a thing, which I don't.
So let's define, but what do you mean by mindfulness meditation, by the way?
Okay.
What is that?
So yes. So mindfulness meditation is, I believe, also known as, I think it's pronounced Vipassana. Let me look it up and see if I'm saying that right. I want to make sure.
I think so.
Yeah. So it's basically, the idea is, let's talk about some of the misconceptions about meditation first, like what it isn't, or specifically mindfulness. There is this idea of, you know, sitting in a room with your legs folded and emptying your mind and spending 10 minutes or an hour or a day or a year just not thinking about anything. And that is totally not what any version of meditation I've ever engaged in is trying to accomplish.
Well, if it's not thinking, then I think everybody's walking around meditating.
So the idea of mindfulness is that you choose an item to focus on. Most commonly, it's going to be something like your breath, but it can also be sounds. It can be something in your visual field. You pick a thing. The breath is the easiest thing because it's so rhythmic and so predictable and easy to count on. You know, I mean, it's gonna happen.
And you can sense it with different parts of your body and your feelings, yes. Right? So I know a lot of them will say, okay, feel where your breath is coming into your nose, you know, and right. Pinpoint that area and think about that, or take belly breaths. So extend your stomach and feel you consciously push your stomach out as you're breathing in. And, so you're feeling, your stomach moving, and you're also hearing your breath go in and out. So I think that can really start to have you focus in and zone out a little bit, which is where you want to go.
Yeah, I think I mentioned on one of our early episodes on No More Mr. Nice Guy that when I start meditating in the morning, I can tell a lot from my mood based on where my breath is the most noticeable. And when I'm experiencing any kind of anxiety or nervousness or anything like that, I feel it kind of right in my solar plexus, right below the middle of my rib cage and where my lungs kind of come together.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I feel it when things are not great. When things are good, it's basically my clavicles, right here at the top of my chest. I feel that going up and down. And so anyway, the goal is to find that spot where your breath feels the most real and you can connect to it the easiest, and then just give that your attention as good as you can. And then when thoughts pop into your head, which they always do, then you notice the thought and you let it go. And then you just redirect your attention back to the thing you're supposed to be paying attention to for your meditation practice, your breath. Again, for me, in most cases, I focus on my breath. And so then the next thought comes in and you say, okay, there it is. There's another one. And then you go back to your breath. One of the things I find, one of the things that helps me when I'm doing it to maintain my attention on the breath as long as possible is to count them to myself, to think while I'm doing it, to think 1 in, 1 out, 2 in, 2 out, 3 in, 3 out, and just count every inhalation and exhalation. And then when a thought pops into my head, I notice it, I let it go, I get back to the breath, and I start to count back over it at 1 again.
So have you ever found yourself even temporarily kind of getting a little disappointed in how long it took you to realize you were lost in thought?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So I go through that where, I know, and I've been told over and over again from the very start of learning how to meditate is thoughts are normal. They're going to come in and out, and that's part of the process.
Right. But don't judge yourself or criticize yourself. It is impossible.
And sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, it was like 15 minutes later before I realized I was lost in thought, And what's interesting is I tend to get lost more in my thoughts in the morning meditations than in any other time of the day.
Interesting.
Afternoon and evening and stuff. I feel like my mind isn't running as much, and maybe it's because I've been awake longer and, things have had a chance to run in the background, but in the morning, sometimes, I'll count 1 breath or whatever. And then the next thing I know, it's 20 minutes later. And I've never gotten back to either my mantra or thinking about the breath,
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation from one of our previous episodes. I was talking to a friend about something I said about how I would keep a notepad nearby so that if I felt like I had an intrusive thought where I couldn't let it go, I would write it down.
Yeah.
And she suggested, I think wisely so, she's like, maybe you should not do that. Maybe you should just live with that intrusive, unshakable thought and just keep working at it. And if you blow the whole 10-minute session just stuck on that one thought, but trying to manage it, then so be it. That was your work that day.
Yeah, I guess that's a great question, is what are you doing with that thought after you put it in, after you write it down? Is it then gone and you never revisit it? Or is that just a temporary holding? Is that or is it a temporary holding position and you do end up processing it at another time down the road?
It depends. Sometimes it's a thing that I feel like I have to do that day. And so I do have some anxiety of, if I don't write this down, I'm going to forget about it and that thing's not going to get done. But I think
in those cases, I absolutely would still write it down and get it out of my head, because at that point, unless
I'm not going to now. That's okay. It seems like the harder thing is to not do that. So that's I'm gonna. Okay. One of the articles I read was that you should think of meditation not like relaxing and not like doing nothing. You should think of it more like you think of going to the gym, which means if it's not hard, you're probably wasting your time.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if there are, I'm thinking when you say write it down, for me, I'm thinking of things like, oh, go return stuff to Amazon, or, buy chicken, not things like I've got to solve this problem and I don't know how. Right. That's what I was thinking. Maybe I'm not interpreting what you said.
I get some of both. I get some of it is sort of trivial, just tasks and errands that I need to run. And then some of it is, more complex, like, reach out to this friend, mend this relationship, stuff like that. And
oh yeah, I think
even those, so I still think in both cases, I think the most valuable thing to do is say, no, I'm not going to let my monkey mind hijack my session, and I'm not going to give it an easy way out either. I'm going to beat it into submission. Essentially, I'm going to say, no, these 10 minutes belong to this one thing, and this intrusive thought. It might seem silly to say, but if it's important enough, it'll come up when I'm done with this.
Oh, for sure.
Oh
yeah, absolutely.
So that's the method that I'm at now. I'm not writing anything down. I'm not even having the pen and paper nearby when I'm doing my 10-minute practice in the morning. And I'm just going back to counting those breaths until now. Again, I use guided meditations where it seems like hard mode is definitely just sitting there and not having a voice that occasionally comes in and tells you, hey, think about this, notice this, come back to the breath, stuff like that, which, Sam Harris narrates his, and he's got some other people that he works with. There's this new guy that I heard with a British accent, which is great. The Headspace guy has a British accent too. And boy, those sure are relaxing.
I like the guided meditations because I have a tendency to fall asleep during my meditations if I don't have a guided meditation. And I'll start out, focusing on my breath or, thinking about something, but then I'm sitting there, I'm relaxed, and, sometimes I'm tired, and sometimes I'll just slip right into sleep. And before I know it, I haven't been doing any meditation, whereas the guided ones, they won't let you go very long before they say something, and that'll kind of wake me up a little bit and kind of refocus me. So I enjoy the guided ones.
What position are you in when you meditate? Are you sitting up in like the desk chair that you're at right now, or how do you do that?
I have I try to stay vertical, basically sitting straight up as much as possible. I have I've got a reclining chair that I've done that. And usually if I do that, I'll fall asleep usually.
Yeah.
So I try to keep my body straight.
Have you ever tried one of those meditation cushions or pillows where you sit down on top of those?
No, because my legs aren't that flexible. So any Indian style or whatever sitting on the floor just
I don't think we
for me.
We can't call it that. We can't call it that anymore. Dave.
Oh, we can't. Cross legs. No, I'm sure style. Okay.
I'm sure it has to be cross legged.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. Sorry. That's from my. Yeah. Okay. So I apologize.
And I'm not sure who that offends. Does that offend people from India or indigenous Americans?
Oh, I thought it would be. So we can't even say Native Americans anymore? If these are indigenous Americans?
I think indigenous people
is better.
Yeah, because
more encompassing.
They didn't really opt into being Americans. They just kind of got annexed, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So I think that would be, growing up, that was what was.
Yeah, the idea of them sitting around a campfire with the teepees in the background, that kind of thing. Yeah,
did you have a teepee as a kid? I had a teepee. It was nice.
I think I might have. I think it was like an inside one made out of it was made out of the same plastic that cheap Halloween costumes were made out of. Remember those?
Yes, sure.
That was not a that in Florida. Those were brutal.
Wow. Yeah, my mom didn't always purchase the cheap Halloween costumes and would make me she knew how to sew.
Yeah.
So I have some really embarrassing costumes as a kid. She sewed I was a pumpkin one time, and it just sewed this big orange sack on me with had leaves and everything, and it was just I wasn't 3. Let's just put it that way, where it didn't matter.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, so I have thought about getting one of those cushions and trying that. Now, obviously, my space is not very big. Normally, I sit at the same place I sit when I normally record a podcast. Clearly, I'm not in my camper right now. I'm actually at a friend's condo. He let me borrow it for a few days over in the Daytona Beach area. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so usually I sit where I sit to record the podcast and do my meditation there. But I have thought about getting either a folded blanket or a cushion and then sitting cross-legged on my bed and trying to do the meditation there.
You mean Indian style?
I do not mean that. How dare you? Now you're just being provocative. We're gonna get demonetized now, as if we make any money from this.
Yeah, I wish I was that flexible to be able to sit like that. It's painful for me. I see a lot of people do it. They look like they like it. But yeah, I have to have a chair with a strong back to keep me in the right position.
Okay, here's a question I have for you. Have you talked to anybody that has been apprehensive about meditation because they believe it to be some sort of a religious institution that's incompatible with their own religion?
No, I have not. I have heard that.
Yeah.
When I've not met somebody personally.
When I went to Bible college way back in the mid 90s, there were definitely some folks there. And I mean, I don't remember having a strong opinion about it one way or the other, but there were some folks there that definitely believed that yoga and meditation were absolutely, false religions, and that you weren't allowed to do either of those things. But I did read an article today that made a pretty compelling case to say that, since meditation is not exclusive to any one religion, it has much more in common with science than it does with a belief system, in that there is a process with specific steps, with, sort of concrete principles, and meditation produces verifiable results every time in the practicer. And so, or practitioner. So it does make a pretty good, the repeatability and the verifiability of what happens when you do it makes a pretty good case that this is much closer to a science than a religion. And the thing is, you don't have to believe anything metaphysical to get benefits out of particularly mindfulness meditation, which is the version that I have the most experience with.
Yeah, I mean, it's the exact opposite of getting stressed out about something. Nobody questions whether that's a religious experience.
That's
right?
True. That's true.
Think about it. You're consciously slowing down your breath. You are consciously relaxing. You are closing your eyes, and you're reducing the amount of input that we're getting on a daily basis, because you're not listening to music or news or seeing advertising or any of that stuff. And so it is a direct physical, and I mean, it's all been measured, but you can feel it. You don't even need any fancy scientific experiments to prove this to you. You're purposely relaxing yourself the same way you would purposely give yourself anxiety by watching something or doing something that is stressful. So yeah, I think the thoughts that you have is really what could make it a little bit more religious or spiritual than other things. But
exactly
for me specifically, that's not the benefit that I'm looking for it.
Yeah, I can say from my part, I am able to engage in it without any kind of metaphysical or religious baggage at all. All I'm doing is observing my body, which was either evolved or created depending on your school of thought. And I'm observing my body, and then I'm observing my thoughts, and then I'm going back to observing my body. And it's a pretty simple process that again, doesn't have to be anything more than that unless you want it to. So one of the points I read is this idea that basically there's a bunch of different kinds of meditation. And, again, I focus mostly on mindfulness, and I'm going to ask you about your experience with transcendental meditation here shortly, but they seem to all have two things in common. The first is you bring your mind to sort of a quiet and still state, and then you observe how your mind operates in that state. And that's really, that's it. Beyond that, there can be a lot of variety in the way that people experience it and the different methods, but it's pretty much that you get your mind into sort of a different state than it's in by default. You kind of change up your default mode and go into a different way of being, and then you just pay attention to what that's like.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So, most of the meditation apps that are available, and I made a list of some of the common ones that I've messed with. They're tried out. Headspace, Calm, Waking Up is the one I use on a regular basis, and then another one called 10% Happier. And those all focus mostly on some kind of a mindfulness meditation practice. I would say the second most the type of meditation I've been exposed to the second most after mindfulness is transcendental meditation. And tell me a little bit about what the process was for you to, like, how'd you hear about it? How'd you decide to get involved? If you're comfortable telling, what did it cost you as far as money and time to learn how to do it? And then what does the ongoing sort of maintenance of it look like after you learn what it's about?
Yeah. So my first experience with meditation goes back maybe 15 years ago with one of my friends from New Jersey, Dan. We were all in a shore house in New Jersey, and there was maybe 10 to 12 of us, whatever, and we go out on a regular basis. And Dan always, he rarely did any drugs or anything else like that to kind of keep him awake, but he'd be able to, stay up and party till 2-3 in the morning with no problem. And this was always fascinating to me. And then I kind of put it together. Before we'd go out, he'd meditate in his room for like an hour. And,
oh, really?
And I was just like, what do you do when you meditate? Like, how do you, yeah. But he did this regularly, and it really, I was like, okay, that's interesting. And he was always he's very calm person, and always in a good mood. And I was just like, maybe there's something to this. So I kind of, a few years passed by, and then I was listening to the radio, and I'd heard Jerry Seinfeld talk about transcendental meditation. And I respect Seinfeld quite a bit. I love his humor. I love his comedy. I think he handled himself fairly well as far as A-list celebrities go. Sure. In terms of the amount of trouble most of them can get into. He wasn't perfect, but he did things pretty well. And when he was and I know he takes his business and his comedy very seriously and treats it like a business. And what he had said was, he got a sense of extra energy from doing the transcendental meditation. So basically, when he would do it in the afternoon, he wouldn't need to take a nap anymore. And so I was like, okay, I was a regular napper at the time. I'm like, well, having some extra energy would be good. I'd heard also Howard Stern had done some TM as well. And I was like, okay, so there might be something to this. So I checked out a local TM instructor, and to be honest with you, I don't remember exactly how much it was. It wasn't cheap, but it was a series of 3 different sessions you needed to go. And you basically just watched videos and talked to the instructor. And he basically gave you the history about transcendental meditation, how it came from India, and certain people, gurus, had developed this technique about, being mindful. And really it's the sense of it is you're given a sound, which becomes your mantra. And that is a secret. You're not supposed to tell anybody about what that is. And that's only for you to know. And you're just between you and your instructor, and you're given this, and he walks you through how to meditate with that sound. So basically you just say that sound to yourself over and over and over again for 20 minutes in the morning, and then again 20 minutes in the afternoon. And it's not much different than listening to your breath, and focusing on your breath. It's very similar. So I find myself doing the transcendental meditation more often than the breath focused meditation, Now, there's some studies that say when you do the TM, you supposedly get better brain. So your left side and your right side of that different hemispheres of your brain get more in sync when you do a transcendental meditation than other types of meditation. Now, interesting. And that was one of the videos that they showed us. And that supposedly when the two halves of your brain sync up, that has certain positive effects for you. And so I do feel like I go a little bit deeper when I do say my mantra versus just listening to my breath. Meaning when I say deeper, I feel like not necessarily asleep, but like in a hypnotic state a little bit. And so then when I come out of it, I feel a little bit more energized than I would if I had just done the breath meditation. And I feel like it's a little bit more concentrated when I do the TM versus just the breath. So that's what I mean when I go deeper. I feel a little bit more energetic. I have a little bit more energy afterwards. I feel a little bit more calm, and I feel that calmness lasts a little bit longer during the day. Now, what's really interesting was I was always told, so they have a lot of different events for TM practitioners and practitioners. And some of these are like weekend retreats where basically you go and you spend along more than 20 minutes meditating, and you do it more than twice a day because you're with experienced teachers. Mm-hmm. And I went to one a couple of years after I learned it, and it was down in South Florida. And I was like, okay, let's see what this is all about, and you also learn some, you eat a healthy diet over that weekend, and you do a little bit of yoga, and you do some advanced breathing techniques. So I walk into this room where there's been people who've been teaching meditation for 20, 30 years. Mm-hmm. And it was like I walked into a cloud. I mean, the room, it was like a Holiday Inn conference room. But when I walked in, it almost put me in a meditative state. And there was just like 3 people there. And they were all, practitioners for years and years and years. And it was just to kind of sign in and everything. But as soon as I walked into that room, I felt like I was almost a zombie. I don't know if it was, just my brain thinking. It was noticeable. It was absolutely noticeable. So then what happened was we would have a session where there was 30 people in the room, all students, maybe just learned TM, maybe been practicing it for a few years. And it was led by some of these instructors where they would kind of guide you through a TM meditation. And when you meditate in a group, again, it was incredible. Like you go deeper. That's the best way I can explain it. And then the results from that are you're just calm and peaceful. And after that retreat, I swear it lasted like 2 weeks where I felt like I was almost walking in a cloud all the time, aware, not asleep by any means, and I'm not missing anything, but just very relaxed, very calm, very peaceful. And, it was an experience for sure. And so it was something that I continue to do. And every once in a while, you can actually go for like a boost. If you go back to a TM instructor and you sit in front of them and they'll kind of guide you and they'll talk you through basically close your eyes, say your mantra. That's really it. But it sounds odd, but being in their presence when you're sitting there and you do it and you walk away. Every time I've gone back for like a boost, it's probably 5 or 6 days where I feel extra relaxed. And I don't know if it's a placebo effect, but it feels good.
That reminds me of, I was talking to someone last night about, are you familiar with the concept of mirror neurons?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was a story of, the scientific experiment where these monkeys get their heads wired up and one monkey breaks open a peanut, and the monkey watching him break open the peanut, the same part of his brain activated as if he was himself breaking the peanut. And that's, a lot of the gains we've made in trauma-based therapies and stuff like that have been this idea of, it's crazy how this is another observation that my friend had last night, was the idea that, as a culture, we emphasize individualism so much, and I would say rightly so. Mm-hmm. But just biologically, we are just wired to interact with other people. I mean, our bodies evolved to share experiences with others. And this idea of the level of connection where our bodies respond to us observing other people doing things. And so that's what made me, when you talked about just walking into that room and knowing that, these people that had disciplined themselves into that practice, how much it must have changed their body language. It must have changed a lot of the nonverbals that they were giving off in a way that your body was like, oh, this is where I am and this is what we're doing.
Yeah, a sense of calmness, whatever that. Yeah, exactly. And the mirror neurons too. Check it out. You can smile at somebody, and more often than not, they're going to smile back whether they know you or not. That's just right. That's how we're wired.
Yep.
When you were talking about that, I just realized when I used to play soccer, when I was on the sideline, I mean, my legs would twitch when I'm watching the game because I would be in my mind, I'm where the ball is and want to attack it. And that's why I have a hard time watching it on television, because I get that urge, and I get those body twitches. It's nuts.
Let me, I think we're coming to the end of our time, but I did want to share some concrete benefits that people can expect to experience if they do decide to develop a meditation practice and make it a regular part of their life. And some of these are, I wouldn't say specific to men, but I think some of these advantages might resonate with men even more than they would with women. The first one is a meditation practice can help develop emotional intelligence, which is, I think we live in a culture that across the board really does work hard to emphasize production and productivity, where some of the softest of the soft skills are kind of pushed to the side. And it's more of, what can you do for me? Not who are you or who can you be? But with a regular meditation practice, it can make you better at noticing and observing your strong thoughts and emotions, and sort of get you out of the pattern of just instinctively reacting to everything and feeling like, all you can do is, feel like that little boat in the middle of the stormy sea, or that kite in the middle of the hurricane. You can notice what's going on with you, and then decide if you want to continue in that. One of the things that Sam Harris talks about is how remarkably short a half-life anger has. If you don't feed your anger by giving it more fuel in the form of more negative thoughts, it pretty much dissipates on its own pretty quickly. I mean, within a number of seconds, you will stop being angry unless you work to stay angry.
Yeah, I feel like it takes a lot of energy to be angry, right? I feel like you just kind of get all tight, your muscles tighten up and everything. And it's not something that our bodies want to continue doing.
No, your mind has to jump in and say, okay, this is what we're doing. Let's stay the course. Let's keep throwing fresh wood onto this fire so that it keeps burning. Right. And I think that with discipline and with a stronger muscle of deciding what you want to pay attention to, you can drastically reduce the amount of time you spend in sort of those emotional spirals that we can get into. Another benefit is that meditation can reduce work stress and anxiety. I read a study earlier this morning where, like any study, they get a control group and then they get a group where they want them to try something new. And in this case, it was mindfulness meditation. And the intervention group reported significant improvements in their own perception of well-being, distress, job strain, as well as they felt like they were more supported by their colleagues at the office. And the only thing that changed, and their colleagues didn't even know that they were doing mindfulness meditation, but they started doing mindfulness, and they felt like they were getting more support from their coworkers than the control group did.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the way that you frame your interactions with other people can be changed by spending time in meditation. Another study had, it was among people that had, I believe they had heart disease and had already experienced some sort of an incident like a heart attack or something like that, stroke, something along those lines. And they found out the people that developed a meditation practice had a 48% reduction in repeated incidents of heart attack and stroke. So if you got into meditation, you were 48% less likely to have a second stroke or a second heart attack.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, one of the things people talk about in terms of heart issues is anxiety and stress, right? And like I said before, you're undoing that. You're undoing all that stuff, that even the low level stuff that you don't even realize is stress anymore because you just gotten so used to it.
Right.
This meditation is going to kind of undo that. And that's pretty significant numbers though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that kind of stress can turn to like a low level hum that is just always going on in the background.
That's a great way of phrasing it. Yeah. A little white noise.
Exactly. Isn't it nice to know that you could turn that off or at least turn it down?
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing that made me think way back to when we did No More Mr. Nice Guy for the podcast. Benefit 4 is that meditation can improve your sex life. And here's how they reference that. Basically, the two biggest sources of dysfunction among men is shame and anxiety. And we talked about how, I mean, those were really the two things that No More Mr. Nice Guy made an effort to say, okay, it's possible to recognize and address these two problems. And, you know, I think Glover said something along the lines of sex is where all of the nice guys' problems really come to live. You know, that's and those problems are shame and anxiety. So if you can figure out a way to observe your emotions and your feelings in a non-judgmental way, then you can work toward a place where you no longer identify yourself based on your shame and anxiety. You know, you're a person that occasionally experiences shame and occasionally experiences anxiety, but you are not your shame and your anxiety. And I feel like that would open you up in every aspect of your personal relationships, especially sex.
Yeah.
All right. And the last one was reducing social pressure. And that talked a little bit about this tendency we have now. And it's relatively new, certainly on the evolutionary time scale, but with social media, it's like, how do we not just constantly compare our daily life to everybody else's highlight reel? You know what I mean? It's like we're all sharing the best stuff about our lives on social media, and then we make this mistake of comparing our sort of dull, boring, stressful day to day with everybody else's highlight reel, and we come up wanting. We feel like, wow, everybody else is having a better life than me.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that the fact that we compare is innate and built into us, and don't try to not compare, because you're not going to win that. You're not going to win that struggle.
Right.
You will always compare. That's how we are wired. So the comparison will happen. It's then, what do you do with that information, and how do you let it affect you? And I think that's where the meditation comes in, and it allows you then, instead of getting swept up in those emotions of feeling envious and being maybe, jealous and some form, maybe angry because this person's getting or doing all these things and you don't feel like they deserve to be doing these things for whatever reason.
Right.
It's then, how quickly, and the more you practice the meditation, the more quickly you can interrupt those thoughts and say, okay, put them into a different perspective, look at the things in your life, realize that's not their daily life, whatever that might be for you.
Right. And, another thing that, meditation can help you do is with that comparison. Let's say, for just example, pulling out a random number, say you're going to spend an hour a day comparing your life to other lives, right? One of the things we've talked about before is try to make as much of that comparison a comparison to your previous life and a comparison to the life that you want to have in the future, and not somebody else's.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And yeah, with a developed attention muscle, which is what essentially meditation does for you. It makes that muscle of directed attention stronger. When you start seeing yourself, comparing yourself to other people, just try to interrupt that and think, okay, instead of comparing myself, I know I can't get away from comparing, but let me spend a few minutes comparing where I'm at today to where I was a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or where I want to be 10 years from now. And just take a few moments to do that and see how that makes you feel about where you've been, where you are, and where you're going. And I think I can say with some certainty that's a better way to spend your time than, looking at your friend's new car, new shoes, new house on his Instagram story.
I agree. Yeah. It's important to measure backwards, meaning,
right.
Look at where you've come from. Don't measure against your ideal and even the goal that you have, because you're always going to come up short from where you are because you're not there yet. So it doesn't even make sense. So look at where you came from, right? Look at that. Look at those accomplishments and those achievements.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to say was, if you are not currently active in a meditation practice, and we said anything that makes it sound appealing to you, again, the apps that I have the most experience with are Calm, 10% Happier, Headspace, and Waking Up. And my personal favorite is the Waking Up app. You can sign up for a trial to give it a shot, see what you think. Even if you try it out and then it goes to a subscription and you decide, after a month or 2 months that it's not working for you, you can go to wakingup.com, I believe it is, and basically tell them, hey, I tried this for a month, didn't like it. They'll just give you the money back, no questions asked.
Nice.
Yeah. And you can also say, hey, I did your free trial, but I can't afford to subscribe to the app. They'll let you subscribe for free. Sam Harris's business model is, I don't want anyone who feels like they will benefit from this to not be able to have it because they can't afford it. So there is a portal on their website where you basically tell them, hey, here's my email address. I want to use this, but I can't afford it. And they'll just give it to you for free.
That's great. That's the exact opposite of the experience I had with the Talkspace app, by the way, for therapy.
Why don't you, I'd like for our listeners to hear what that experience was.
So I was excited trying to find a therapist. And I, looked at the Talkspace app. You fill out a couple of questions. They match you with a therapist. And, I thought, okay, well, this is the type of therapy that they practice. I figured, they've been doing this for a while. Their algorithms are good. They're going to hook me up with somebody, a great therapist. And, within the first 5 minutes, and she was very professional of our session, she was like, listen, I don't handle this type of therapy. You may want to find somebody else. I'm not going to charge you for the session. So what you do is you sign up and you have to purchase either a month of virtual face, over Zoom messaging sessions, or both, right? So I did the virtual one, and I'm sure in the fine print it said this somewhere. However, if you cancel after that initial payment of 4 sessions for that month, you only get half your money back, even if you don't use the sessions.
Wow.
So the therapist was like, listen, contact customer service, and I'll put this in the notes, to not charge you for this session. And, they'll switch you over to a bunch of 10-minute sessions instead of the 45-minute sessions that I purchased. Those 10-minute sessions for the intro to interview therapists, that's not even an option on the app. And so I was like, well, all right, I'll contact customer service and I'll ask about this. And she's like, they can convert your sessions to these interview sessions of 10 minutes. And, you get a bunch of them and you can figure out what therapist works for you. I said, that's great, but why isn't that an option? Why isn't that the first thing? Because it's right. What the average person takes about 17 therapists or something ridiculous to find one that they like. I thought it was some crazy number.
Yeah. We heard, there was some crazy number that Renata referenced that somebody she was working with had been through a lot of people.
Yeah. So maybe that's where I was thinking it was from. Yeah. So I wrote to customer service. I had a ticket open for over a week. They didn't respond back. I wrote again on the ticket, didn't respond back. So then I go try to cancel and they're like, oh, well, we'll give you a credit, or we'll match up with a new therapist, or you can pause your subscription, whatever. Right. So I tried it, found another therapist, and then I was waiting for customer service to write back. They never wrote back. I ended up canceling and I lost the entire first session. And then the money that was remaining, I only got half of it back.
Jeez.
So I vehemently, and then I still haven't responded to my ticket from over 2 weeks ago. So
that's terrible.
I say, stay away from the Talkspace app as much as possible. And they even rope you in to try to fill out insurance information to see if you're covered by your insurance, but they do no checking to see if your insurance actually covers any of your sessions. There's no information about that. You're just filling out that information. It got lost. It sucked into a black hole somewhere. There's no follow-up or anything. So
yikes.
Disaster.
Okay.
For me, my experience. Some people might like it.
Yeah, I was talking to, because you're not my only friend that's looking to make the transition from non-therapy to therapy. And I talked to Renata a little bit about it during our last session, and she's pretty negative on the apps. She's had a few of them try to come to her to work with them, and she's got a full schedule where she doesn't really have any time anyway, but she's pretty low on those companies. She kind of has this opinion that the therapists that are working for them are either not the best at their job, or they're very earlier in their career where they're just trying to, get some business in a way that's very convenient for them to work from home and stuff like that. So she said she's open to the idea that you could find somebody good, especially somebody young who's just getting started, that you can work with. But for the most part, what she recommends is, go to Psychology Today and do some searching on there, try to find somebody that you think would be a good match, either for virtual or for in-person therapy, and give them a try. And she said there are people on there that will, work with a sort of a sliding scale financially, so they can, work with you and stuff like that. So I'm passing that advice from her along. And then there's another site that one of my favorite guys from Instagram is an account called Therapy Jeff. And he works with a website called therapyden.com. And it has a lot of good filters where you can kind of zero in on what kind of stuff you're looking for help for. And he seems to be a super sharp, compassionate, ethical guy, just, from the videos that I've watched. And he puts out 1 or 2 videos a day. He puts out a lot of content, and it's all great stuff. So the fact that he also has some pretty negative things to say about BetterHelp that kind of went viral. So he seems to take very seriously his commitment to helping people find a resource where they can get matched up with a good therapist. So whenever anybody asks me, I say, Therapy Den and Psychology Today. Those are the ones that that people who seem to be qualified therapists have said, hey, this is where you should go. So I just want to pass it along to everybody.
And I will be checking those out as well. So,
well, good luck. I'm proud of you for taking the step to try to make something happen. And it's going to be, obviously it's not quite as big a decision as, who to marry, who to have kids with, but, picking a therapist is a big deal. I got very lucky with Renata because, I started seeing her because she was my ex-wife's therapist, and she happened to be the kind of person that I needed. And, most people won't be that lucky, I don't think.
Yeah, no, you definitely got lucky. I'm jealous. So,
all right, man. Anything else to bring up before we close out this one?
No, not today.
All right. I need to go cook myself some breakfast. I got a bunch of stuff at Publix yesterday for the 2 mornings we'll be at the condo. Okay. So I'm about to go prepare a sausage, onion, habanero, and cheese omelet.
Sounds delicious.
I know. I can't wait. I'm real excited. All right, man. I will chat with you later. All right. Take care.
All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for spending time with us on the Mindfully Masculine podcast. If you liked the episode, or you think it would be useful for someone else, please leave us a review and join the Mindfully Masculine group on Facebook. Remember, fellas, don't act masculine, be masculine.